having Democrats who really don't know anything about police procedure decide full out on the federal level exactly what local police departments ought to do after a 30-year continuous drop in crime in the United States is a pretty astonishing move. Republicans were going to do something different. They were going to say, okay, these chokeholds have sometimes resulted in death. These submission holds have sometimes resulted in death. So we should look at the procedures. Okay, it was a little bit vaguer. Democrats didn't like that. Okay, so Democrats decided for that reason, among many others, that they were just going to block this police reform bill put forward by the Republicans. They weren't even going to allow a vote on it. They weren't going to allow a vote. Now, just a couple of weeks ago, the idea was if Republicans don't bring forward legislation, then they don't care about Black Americans. So immediately, Republicans put together a bill. Senator Tim Scott, who's been very outspoken about his belief that the police sometimes do act in racially disparate ways, right? He's talked about his own personal experiences with what he believes to be racial profiling. He was the lead sponsor on this bill, and Democrats rejected it outright. Now, I will note that the suggestion that America is endemically plagued by racist police is not backed by very much data. Jason Riley has a good piece in the Wall Street Journal talking about how the police act, talking about the real problem with police. He points out in a 2015 Gallup poll taken after Michael Brown was killed in Ferguson, a majority of Black respondents said police treat them fairly. Far more Blacks, 38%, than whites, 18%, said they want a greater police presence in their local communities. Another Gallup survey published last year asked Black and Hispanic residents of low-income neighborhoods about policing and found that these groups, quote, aren't averse to law enforcement. In fact, they are particularly concerned about crime in their neighborhoods. 59% of both Blacks and Hispanics said they would like the police to spend more time in their area than they currently do, making them more likely than white residents, 50%, to respond this way. Democrats and Republicans seem to agree that a more uniform data collection among police agencies would be a good thing, says Jason Riley. They're right, but it's no guarantee the media will report the additional data or put it in context. We have plenty of data right now. Police shootings have fallen precipitously since the 1970s. Upward of 95% of Black homicides in the United States don't involve law enforcement. Empirical studies have found no racial bias in police use of deadly force, and the racial disparities that do exist stem from racial differences in criminal behavior. The problem isn't a shortage of data, but a race-based narrative that is immune to any data that challenge it. Okay, nonetheless, there was a push for police reform. The idea is that the police across the country are endemically brutal and terrible and awful across the board. And so Republicans push forward this bill. And then the Democrats block it. The Democrats just outright block it. 45 senators, they don't even allow a vote because the Republicans control the Senate. So the Republicans are going to get a majority here. That 45 senators say we're not even going to allow a vote. According to the Wall Street Journal, a minority of the Senate, 45 Democrats, voted Wednesday to close off any debate on a police reform bill. Not against the bill, against even allowing the Senate to debate or offer amendments to Tim Scott's proposal. The Republicans were going to allow something like 21 amendments to the proposal. The calculation is pure election year cynicism. Block the Senate from passing a bill that Republicans could campaign on, then denounce Republicans for refusing to pass the bill that House Democrats will pass this week that would micromanage local police departments. Blame Republicans for opposing reform when Senate Democrats were the real opponents, is the Wall Street Journal editorial board. Much of the press corps will play along by reporting on the House vote, but treating the Senate vote as a GOP failure. The election year calculation will go largely unmentioned as Democrats maneuver to return the Senate to Democratic Party control in 2021. It is no accident that California Senator Kamala Harris led the filibuster as she campaigned to be Joe Biden's running mate. So nothing gets done, which of course is the purpose, because the Republicans in the Senate are not going to vote for the House bill. They're not going to vote for a bill that micromanages the police to the extent that Democrats want to micromanage this thing. So Democrats are just demagoguing this. They don't actually want 70% of what they could have. That is what Tim Scott pointed out. He said, like, you guys, you could get 70 to 80% of what you want here, and you won't even allow us to put up the bill for amendment? We can't even debate this thing? I get the feeling maybe you have some different priorities here.
I finally realized what the problem is, Mr. President. The actual problem is not what is being offered, it is who is offering it. And instead of getting 70% of what you wanted today and tomorrow and next week, you get zero. And you're going to wait until the election to get more. Okay. Well, why wouldn't you take the 80% now, see if you can win the election and add on the other 20%?
And the answer, of course, is because they don't want the 80% now, because they don't really want to solve problems. Many of our politicians, many of the members of the media class, they don't want to solve problems. They want to keep talking about the problem because the problem is politically beneficial for them. They want to exaggerate the problem or continue to jabber about the problem, and they want to make it look like people who disagree with them on policy actually don't care about the problem. Leading that crew, of course, is Nancy Pelosi, who's just a terrible human being. I mean, really despicable. She said over the last 48 hours that Republicans are trying to cover up George Floyd's murder while they're trying to pass a police reform bill. that her colleagues are blocking at her behest, presumably. She is saying that Republicans are trying to cover up George Floyd's murder, which is insane.